Morning, Judge Staskal. We're glad you could make it this morning, and we're ready for your opening statement.
Thank you, Justice Wiggins, and good morning, everyone. I'm
Morning.
happy to have this chance to visit with all of you this morning, and I want to take this opportunity also to thank all of you for your important service on this commission. I'm very excited to be a part of this process, but I have some other exciting news that I feel compelled to share with you this morning. I became a grandfather last night for the first time.
Excellent.
Thank you. My daughter...
Is it true that that's the only grandchild in the world?
It's true. First one. My daughter here in Des Moines gave birth to a healthy 7-pound, 7-ounce boy last night, late. And Mom, Dad, and baby are all doing fine. Grandpa wishes he'd gotten a little more sleep last night, but he's doing fine as well. Let me tell you all why I think I would be an excellent choice for a position as Justice of the Iowa Supreme Court. As I said in my written application, I think the two most important qualifications for an appellate court judge are a demonstrated record of excellence in the study of the law and a broad range of experience in the practice of law and preferably also as a trial court judge. My qualifications in both of those areas I think are exceptional. My academic record demonstrates my proficiency and ability as a student of the law. I think I've also demonstrated the ability to clearly convey my thinking and my legal analysis in writing, another very important qualification for an appellate court judge. Turning to my legal experience, I think I've had about as broad and deep a career in the practice of law as a person could have. I started my career as an appellate lawyer in the Attorney General's Office, Criminal Appeals Division. And as I look at the lights there in front of Justice Wiggins, it takes me back to that time when I was making oral arguments before the court, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals. My job in that capacity was to research the law, read the record that was created in the trial court, write a brief on the part of the state, and then make the oral argument before the Supreme Court or the Court of Appeals. After I did that for about a year and a half, I believe, for the state, I moved to the newly created Appellate Defender's Office and did the same thing, only on the side of the indigent criminal defendant. After 3 years of being an appellate lawyer, I moved back to the Attorney General's Office and went into the Area Prosecutions Division, where I traveled around the state prosecuting criminal cases in the trial courts all around the state. It was in that position that I learned how to be a trial lawyer. I prosecuted, my main responsibility was the prosecution of criminal tax cases and other white-collar criminal cases, although I did have experience in prosecuting some other general criminal offenses such as sexual abuse and perjury. After being a trial lawyer and a prosecutor for several years, I joined a 15-member law firm here in Des Moines and engaged in the private practice of law for the next 10 years, for a couple years as an associate, and then later as a partner in the firm. My practice as a private lawyer was varied and broad. I continued to do some trial work. I did some appellate work. I had a argument before the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals. One of the writing samples that I've provided was in that case, and I also had an extensive office practice. I represented individuals. I represented small businesses, cities, and some other public bodies such as the Metropolitan Transit Authority and the Metro Waste Authority. So when I began my judicial career, I had accumulated almost 17 years of experience as a lawyer. I had seen the legal system and participated in it from just about every angle and perspective you can. I was an appellate lawyer. I was a trial lawyer. I worked for the government as a lawyer, and I worked in private practice as a lawyer. I had been a prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney. And so I had seen and learned the system from just about every perspective that you can. And my experience in each of those positions was not superficial or fleeting. It was lengthy and deep. Now I've reached the point where I've been on the trial court for 15 years, 10 years as a district court judge, and the first 5 years as an associate court judge. So even my experience on the trial court bench has been just about as broad as it can be since I've been a trial court judge at each level. I've also practiced law in rural areas in the state and in urban areas. When I was in the Area Prosecutions Division, I traveled all around the state prosecuting cases. I had cases in Lyon County, which is the farthest northwest corner of Iowa. I had cases over in Davenport and Dubuque and on the Mississippi River. I had a sexual abuse prosecution in Ottawa, which is over near Council Bluffs. And so I've seen how people in all areas of the state practice law, and I met a lot of lawyers and I met a lot of judges. It actually was during that period of time and that process of going around and seeing what judges do that I became interested in pursuing a career on the bench. I saw a lot of different judges and a lot of different styles. I began to believe that I was well suited for that job and that I could do a good job. And so that is why I eventually pursued a career on the bench. I work in a district now, this district, which has both the most urban county in the state and some of the most rural counties in the state. And I've worked in all of the counties in our district. During my judicial career, I've had administrative experience. When I was an associate district court judge for the last 3 years, in that position before I went on the district court, I was the chief or lead associate judge responsible for scheduling issues and other administrative issues in the associate court in Polk County, which is probably the busiest court in the state. Presently, I am a member of the Supreme Court's Judicial Technology Committee and am participating in overseeing the installation and the development of electronic document management now throughout the state. I think the main, other than having a lot of experience, which I think breeds wisdom and good judgment, I think one of the main advantages of the broad background I have had is that it gives me credibility. It gives me credibility in making decisions in difficult times, such as what we're in now and have been in the past. I have seen, again, the legal system from all of the perspectives, and it gives me a credibility that even when you have to make tough decisions in hard times, people are more willing to accept and embrace, even if they disagree, when they feel like you've been there and done that, so to speak, and you understand their concerns and problems. More than just understanding those problems, though, I think that I can bring to the bench or to the Supreme Court and the administrative responsibilities of the Supreme Court the ability to bridge those gaps that have existed from time to time in the branch between rural and urban districts, between appellate judges and trial court judges, between Des Moines and the rest of the state, because I've done that and been there. And those kinds of tensions that have existed and exist to a significant degree right now in our branch have to be attended to, and they have to be addressed, and they can best be addressed by people who can say that they've seen the system and understand the problems from everyone's perspectives. The final qualification for a good justice that I want to visit about is judicial temperament. One of the things that I'm most proud of about my career, both as a lawyer and as a judge, is the respect that I have from my peers on the bench, lawyers and court staff and personnel and members of the public, whether it's people in court for jury duty, witnesses, litigants, and people from the public that I come into contact with during my job. I'm proud of the fact that in the poll of lawyers taken before the retention election in 2008, when I was on the ballot, I received over a 98% approval rate. That ballot, I don't think, is just a beauty contest. I mean, you can't get a high rating just by trying to please everyone. This is not the job for someone who's interested in trying to please everyone, because you just can't do that. The poll is taken anonymously, so lawyers don't have any concerns about offending judges by the ratings that they give. The poll asks specific questions. How prompt is this judge in getting his or her decisions out? How well does this judge know the law? How well does this judge communicate in writing? What is this judge like on the bench? How does he treat people in court? So I'm proud of the respect that I think I've engendered during my years on the bench and as a lawyer. Let me conclude by simply addressing the question that everybody asks, and why do you want this job? And the answer to that question for me is simple and basic. I'm committed to a career on the bench. I feel like it's my calling. I love doing it, and I think that I'm good at it, probably because I love doing it. A position on the Supreme Court is the highest calling within that profession, and so it's natural for me, I think, to want to have a position on the Supreme Court. The basic bottom line reason why I think I'm a good judge is because I have a passion for justice, and to me justice means the rule of law. I understand, and I'm fully committed to the principle and the statement that we're a great nation because we're a nation of laws and not a nation of men. It's in the judicial branch where that great principle actually takes on meaning in real people's real lives, from small claim cases to complicated civil cases, from traffic court cases to murder prosecutions, all of which are matters that I've been involved in one way or another during my career, either both as a lawyer and as a judge. I'm very proud of the contribution that I made so far to giving life to that principle, and I love my job, and if I don't get this one, I'll be just as happy tomorrow as I am today. But I feel like I have a contribution to make, and I just am simply ready, I think, and committed to make that contribution at the highest level. Again, I thank all of you for your difficult job here and your important service on this commission, and I'd be happy to answer questions that any of you might have.
Are there any questions from that side of the table? Ms. Kogerson.
Good morning, Judge. Thank you.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here and for applying for this position.
Thank you.
I was just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about what experience or knowledge you have that lends itself to the administrative duties of the Supreme Court, and I guess maybe your understanding of what those duties are.
Well, the Supreme Court is the administrator of the entire judicial branch of the state of Iowa. It also has responsibility to develop procedural rules for the court, and so it has obviously fundamental and crucial administrative responsibilities. As I said during my career on the bench, honestly, being an administrator is not my focus, and if I could avoid doing that, I would. But you can't when you're a judge, and you can't in the court that I'm in, and obviously you can't when you're on the Supreme Court. My management style, I would say, is to lead by example, to always make the people that you work with and who work for you understand the importance of their jobs, understand that they're entitled to respect from the people that come to court, but they have to give respect as well. As I said, was lead judge on the district associate bench in Polk County, and so I had a lot of administrative responsibilities as far as arranging schedules, organizing dockets, and things like that. I participated on, back when I started, what was it called? I can't think. Positive improvement or something was all the rage in the management circles, and we had committees that were engaged in those processes, and so I participated in those. As I said, I'm currently on the Judicial Technology Committee and participating in administration in that way. So I do have experience in that area. When I was in private practice, the firm I was in was a relatively small firm, and we did not employ an administrator, so we divided up administrative responsibilities amongst the partners, and I was primarily responsible for supervising personnel. So I think I have administrative experience. I understand the need to be a part of that as part of the Supreme Court.
Mr. Cook, do you have a question?
I do. Judge, you have a very impressive background, varied experience, diverse experiences. Speak to us about the rap that might be placed on your application that you're from Des Moines.
Well, I'm not from Des Moines. I'm from Cedar Rapids. I grew up in Cedar Rapids, and my parents both worked all their working lives, and they didn't have the educational opportunities that their children did, but they understood that the importance of education. They made it a priority for all of us. As I said, I've traveled around the state as a lawyer and as a judge within the district. I can't change the fact that I live in Des Moines, but I do have an understanding, I think, of the needs and perspectives and the different points of view that there are all around the state, particularly between rural and urban. That seems to be, during my experience, the area where there's the most tension. And, you know, people in urban areas can't always see how hard the people are having, the difficulties people in the rural areas are having, because they don't perceive that there's anything going on out there, which is false. There's a lot going on in the rural areas, and people need access to justice in the rural areas. People in the rural areas look at the urban areas and look at the number of judges in Polk County, for example, or in some of the other bigger cities, and say, how can they possibly need more resources? Well, in Polk County, for example, we're at the point where priorities are taking up the vast amount of judicial resources on juvenile cases and criminal cases. So the judges that are left to address civil matters are simply buried, really buried, and that delays justice, and people get upset about that, and it creates problems in and of itself. So again, I live in Des Moines and have for a long time, but I'm an Iowan. I didn't grow up in Des Moines, and I know what the problems are around the state just from my experience.
Mr. Michelson.
Morning, Judge.
Good morning.
You're talking about the areas of around Iowa. Can you expound a little bit on ways that we can better get the judicial system brought to the people?
Well, I think EDMS is a good step forward, because if it works right, it's going to provide access all the time for everybody to the courts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So that's a big step forward. You know, I think we need to continue to do a better job of public relations. What happened last fall, I don't think 4 months ago very many people would have ever imagined that could happen. And I think a big part of the reason that it happened is that we haven't done a good enough job as a branch of government with public relations and with promoting ourselves. Judges aren't, it's sort of inherently inconsistent with a judge's demeanor and temperament to be a self-promoter or a promoter of the judicial branch, because judges have a tendency to shy away from connections that could bring into question their neutrality and bring people to believe that they favor one group or another. That's part of the reason, I think, for the tendency of judges, not just on the Supreme Court, but even district court judges, to sort of become isolated from the rest of the world. So I think we need to sort of shed that sort of old position of remaining sort of above the fray. And I don't mean we need to get out and campaign, but for example, Justice Cady's speech to the legislature, I think, after what we heard before the election and during it, was like a breath of fresh air to me. It was like, finally, someone is speaking some sense. So I think all of us have an obligation at this point, because we've seen how vulnerable the judicial branch can be to outside attacks, to get out in the community whenever we have an opportunity and to educate people and talk about what our role is and what we mean by an independent judiciary and why that's important. So I think we just need to do a much better job going forward of self-promotion and public relations.
Do we have any questions over there? Ms. Deneve?
First of all, I apologize for not returning your phone call. I didn't mean to blow you off, I just forgot about you.
Oh, that's okay. You're not the first person who's ever done that, so.
Right now, there's a lot of terminology going around, strict constitutionalist, activist judge. How would you define the role of the Supreme Court?
Well, the Supreme Court's primary role is to review the decisions of the lower courts to determine whether the courts have made an error. Those kind of labels that you talk about, strict constructionist, activist judge, you know, judges I don't think generally think about themselves in those terms at all. I don't. And when someone uses that term, if you use the term, it probably has a completely different meaning than when Mr. Cochran uses the term. And so it's not useful, I don't think, to use those terms. I think the court, you know, there's over 200 years of jurisprudence about how courts are to approach issues that bring into question the meaning of particular provisions of the Constitution, or what's very common is that bring into question the meaning of statutes passed by the legislature. If I had a judicial philosophy, it is to appreciate the wisdom of those rules that have been developed over that lengthy period of time, understand them, study them, and apply them to the best of you know, my ability. So, see,
We
my
have time
time's
for
up.
one short question. Ms. Dixon?
Yeah.
Good morning, Judge. As
Good
you know,
morning.
there's a number of other district court judges who have applied, including several others from the 5th Judicial District. What separates you from the others?
Are you going to ask them that question?
Yes, we
If we have time.
Okay. You know, there are a lot of qualified applicants, and that's why you guys have such a hard job, but none of us can lose because of that, because there are qualified applicants, and I'm very happy about that. And everybody should be happy about that. My colleagues that have applied, I think, are every single one of them qualified to be on the Supreme Court. I admire them. I treasure them as colleagues. I have differences of opinion maybe with some of them on certain issues, but they're hardworking judges. They're dedicated. They take their role seriously. If I had to distinguish myself from them, I would say it's that I have the combination of experience from all of the perspectives that I mentioned, as well as the experience at the lowest level of the trial court, small claims court. I mean, I learned more about being a judge doing small claim court cases than I have since. I mean, you have all the factors against you in those kind of cases. No lawyers, complicated situations, things like that. So, I mean, that's how I guess I would distinguish myself.
Thank you very much, Judge Staskal.
Thank you all. Thank you very
Judge,
much.